"Don't move, just talk to me, that's all you need to do," he said quietly, voice steady as porcelain laid on a dark table. The man across the boardroom's thrashing blue carpet clutched a trembling object, a line pressed thin across his lips. Someone on the right started toward them, but the CEO's hand cut through the air. "No one moves. I said nobody steps closer." He nodded, eyes never leaving the other man. "You're not alone," he said, every syllable careful, soft as chalk. "I swear it, nobody is going to hurt you today." From behind, the CEO's words cracked, sharp and certain. "Get control of this, right now." Her jaw clenched so tight the tendons jumped. He shifted his weight minutely, one finger extended, palm down, no threat in his posture. "You're scared because no one ever listened. They will now. Even her," he added, just above a whisper, though the room heard. The object in the other man's hand rattled, a cold ring of metal against the boardroom table's edge. The silence broke itself into slices only their breath could fill. "Don't pretend you know what that's like," the CEO hissed. He looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time since entering the room. "I know exactly what it's like," he said, her face blanched, the color draining from forehead down. "Stay with this story. It started 12 days earlier, on a Friday that ended long before dusk." Garrett Turner's feet crunched against the tiled entrance of Mohegan Bancorp's corporate plaza, each step marked by the faint drag of his left sole. The navy polo and government-issue windbreaker declared him part of the background, a postal worker, here to drop off an envelope just a minute before closing. His left hand, fingers curled to hide the old tremor, gripped the white canvas mailbag with a force it didn't deserve. His watch read 4:33. He wondered how many hours until rent came due, the invisible tally of a father who had run calculations on midnight paper for 8 years. Somewhere inside the building, a press conference loomed, its time creeping toward Thursday, 4 p.m., like a hunting animal that wouldn't blink. He stepped forward, offered a tired smile to the woman at the reception desk, and produced his application form. "I just need the front office," he said quietly. "It's for the courier position." The receptionist looked over his shoulder. Expectation was not what she found. "You'll want the glass doors left, that staircase." The elevator pinged. Out swept Linnea Ward, tall, precise, a flash of monochrome silk and steel-edged confidence trailed by 2 assistants. The foyer's hush deepened. Whatever she was, the room recognized money, it always did. "Is there a problem here?" she snapped. The receptionist hesitated. Garrett held out the application again, the tremor less visible now, covered by steadiness in his voice. "Just here with paperwork, I'm on the clock." Linnea's gaze swept over him, stopping at the work-issued jacket, mailbag, scuffed shoes. "You're applying for courier?" she asked, ice forming on each syllable. "Just a job, ma'am," he replied evenly. "What's your name?" Eyebrows arched, jaw fixed. "Turner, Garrett Turner. I can fill in for afternoons or nights if needed." She made no move to take the form. Instead, she lifted it by its corner as if afraid it might stain, and then, deliberately, eyes never leaving him, tore it in half. The sound bit through the lobby. "We don't process walk-in applications, not at this level," she said, dropping both halves in the bin behind her. "Isn't that right, Diane?" "Yes, Miss Ward," the assistant replied, not meeting anyone's gaze. Garrett's fingers flexed, the tremor suddenly spiking, bone-deep ache punching up toward his elbow. He made himself set the mailbag gently on the marble floor and retrieved his ID with the other hand, voice level. "Maybe I'll try again on Monday, or not." Linnea's lips curled. "You people never learn," she said softly. She turned on her heel and strode past, heels gnawing at the tile. He picked up the torn paper and quietly walked for the exit, ignoring the heat coiling along his neck. Someone behind the desk exhaled, almost a whisper. "Sorry, sir." Garrett just nodded once, folding the ruined application in quarters with methodical care. He stepped out into the swell of the late afternoon, his pulse measuring out every failure by the second. Nothing about that exit was finished. Their apartment was on the edge of the neighborhood that new maps ignored, but old ones remembered. The late sun lanced through grime-polished windows, casting long shadows across the carpet and the battered sofa. In the kitchen, Ava sat on a peeling stool, knees pressed up to her chest, clutching a stuffed bunny with one missing eye. The toy's faded ear trailed along the counter, a ghost of someone else's workshop drudgery worn into the cotton. Garrett slipped his shoes off, pausing with one foot hovering above the linoleum. He watched his daughter trace loops around her bunny's stitched mouth, concentration threaded with worry. "Hey," he said, gentler than the door he eased closed behind him. "Daddy, did you get it?" Her voice, small but edged with something older. He set the canvas bag down, shaking his head. "No go today, some places just don't want new faces." He ran his thumb along the uneven seam in the mail pouch, breath catching beneath his ribs. She looked up, the bunny pressed to her cheek, unblinking. "Do you get tired of always having to be so patient?" The question tumbled out, but she never looked away. He swallowed, setting his keys still on the worn blue carabiner his wife once called Lucky on the counter's edge. "I think everyone does," he said eventually, hands working around a napkin. His left palm trembled despite the rest of him being absolutely still. He moved past the old photo, its corner poking beneath a fridge magnet, her mother's hair in a police clip, smile-chasing uniform, a crisp line of service medals almost lost in dust. Sometimes the scent of her perfume clung in the air, the way it did the night she never came home. He found the lunchbox by the sink. Carefully, he jotted a single line on the folded paper, "Be gentle with those who need you most." He tucked it in beside the sandwich and celery sticks, the routine as practiced as brushing his teeth, as if writing a private map for a world she'd have to cross without him there. Ava pulled the bunny between her knees tighter. "Will it always be just us?" she asked. He took a slow breath, crossing to kneel eye level with her, hand resting on the rim of the little table. "Probably for a while, but not forever." His eyes skipped to the fridge where, tucked beneath a pile of bills, a letter in another man's handwriting sat unopened. "Turner, let me know when you need a reference." J.S. He didn't need the world to see it, just knowing it waited was enough. She ran her thumb over the bunny's missing eye. "That's okay," she said. "Some things are all right even when they aren't new." They ate quietly, the clicks of their forks and her offbeat humming the only markers of comfort. He tucked her in just after 9, tracing the length of the old quilt his wife's mother had sewn, a line of defense against the world, row by patient row. In the hush that followed, he cleaned the kitchen, left coins in the tip jar for the neighbor who checked in sometimes, and exhaled, counting the night's seconds until sleep folded him away. Nothing about their quiet was finished either. Above the city, glass reflected the dying afternoon. Linnea Ward stood in her penthouse, the windows running floor to ceiling as if they were there to remind her nothing could hold back the skyline. She checked her watch, then tapped a terse message to her assistant. "Board pack at my desk, no delay." "Yes, Miss Ward," came the reply in less than 3 seconds. Linnea's jacket was a dark sheath, her heels precisely placed beside the graphite rug. She moved through the room as though expecting each item to salute. At a table by the window lay her daily schedule, magazine covers, and a singular interruption. A half-empty prescription bottle, white cap scuffed, the label's pharmacy faded by handling. She paused, thumb nudging the orange plastic between the others, focus shifting from medication to the framed photo sitting half in shadow beside it. A girl, 16, defiant smile, galaxy of freckles, a daughter Linnea could not reach with wires or money, eyes and wrists marked by restless fights. The phone vibrated once, a message from her ex-husband. "Ava had another incident, call me." Linnea barely blinked, still staring past the reflection of herself in the window. The intercom beeped. "Miss Ward, Chair Grayson to see you." "Tell him 5 minutes," she snapped, pacing. Her rhythm sharpened, a wrist flick, a pen capped and uncapped. She pushed the pill bottle, aligning it perfectly with the table's edge as if its symmetry could fix what therapy and bribes had not. A file folder, thick with legal tabs, landed atop her inbox. "Your sign-off for Thursday's press, the new courier's paperwork." She sliced a glance at her assistant. "No more applicants, every delay risks the quarterly numbers." "Board still wants a public face for this, someone relatable," he insisted. "Enough, tell them we will use the partner from Lavin. I don't want complications." There was silence, tension crinkling the edges of his voice. "He was here earlier," he said quietly. "The postal worker, the one who..." She interrupted, unyielding. Decline, next on the list. Make sure the announcement Thursday is perfect. No surprises, I want this clean. He ducked out, closing the cherrywood door quietly. Linnea stared at her reflection once more, isolated in the center of her sky-high fortress, the dark city blinking beneath. The loneliness was a wound that never called itself by name. She pressed her eyes shut, then opened the folder, pretending control was as simple as checking a box. She was wrong. The following Monday, in a different suit and with the mailbag over his right shoulder, Garrett entered through a side door of Mohegan Bancorp's garage level. The building's upper floors throbbed with preparations for the upcoming press event, fuss and ceremony overflowing into service corridors. A commotion snapped his focus, shouts, a warning, put that down, coming from the north stairwell. He moved fast. From his angle, all he could see was a man in company badge flailing, holding something metallic, two security staff with palms outstretched. Eyes darted to Gary, the young night shift guard who sometimes shared coffee with Garrett near midnight in the mailroom. I didn't do anything, you started with me, the man shouted, voice brittle as glass. He waved the heavy flashlight wildly, threatened to hurl it across the polished floor. The crowd watched at a purposeful, nervous distance. Garrett slipped into the center, palms empty, voice dropping into a steady, precise cadence he hadn't called upon in years. Let's slow this way down, he said, gaze even. Nobody's getting hurt. Gary lurked at the edge, hands open but useless. He caught Garrett's eye. Can you? He mouthed, eyes wide. Garrett's approach was textbook, quiet, completely non-threatening. He spoke again, just words, no move to grab or press. You're not angry, you're scared, everyone here hears you now. The man's posture loosened by degrees. His knuckles faded from white to pink, jaw relaxing as the tremor in his own hand stilled. Nobody's out to get you, Garrett continued, voice barely a vibration in the tense air. Let's set the flashlight down. I'll stand right here, nothing in my hands. The metal landed softly on the floor. Security exhaled in one synchronized relief. That wasn't luck, someone Gary murmured, more to the universe than to his colleagues. Linnea swept in behind the knot of staff, eyes sizing the scene in 3-second swipes. Crisis resolved, I see, she said. Probably wasn't complicated. Anyone here could have managed if they'd paid attention. Gary's jaw worked as if he'd bitten down on a raw wire. Garrett, already retrieving his mailbag, simply nodded. Just another day, he said, folding the edge down over the stitched logo. He left through the side door, not waiting for acknowledgement or thanks. But as Gary stood, hands stilling themselves on the service counter, a memory surfaced. A leadership seminar 20 years before, when a younger, sharper-eyed version of someone had calmed a room during a bomb threat with just his voice. He had seen this before, 20 years ago. Gary, who now watched Garrett's every move, spent his next break in the basement, scrolling through archive personnel files and vendor directories. He typed, G. Turner, Courier Contractor Mohegan. The hits were thin, the results confusing. A decade ago, a company in another state, legal filings, a news clipping half-scraped from a now-defunct trade site. Former CEO, it said, of a competitor firm, Turner/Lavin Logistics, declined offer, voluntary resignation. Some kind of internal shift that was never written in the official board minutes. He tried calling HR upstairs. The answer, he's just a temp, no background. An old patent search turned up a signature, G. Turner, filed with a date 4 years ago. Gary left his shift turning over the new facts. Upstairs, Linnea's schedule flickered with additions, press event planning revised, new courier interview notes stricken through. She barked instructions into her headset, ordering PR right, left, reformatting slides, trying to cut every avenue where a surprise could sprout. Across the city, in a school hall scented faintly with disinfectant and sharpened pencils, Ava Turner lined up her bunny for inspection beside her lunch. She waved goodbye to her teacher with 2 fingers, the keepsake pressed tight in the crook of her arm. That night over dishes, she asked, Daddy, will she always look at you like she did today? The question landed with the same weight as her earlier one, more precise for its simplicity. He stopped, water from the plate splattering, hands going still in the foam. People's eyes change, he answered, quiet, not quite looking up. She hummed, unconvinced. Ava wiggled the bunny, but she needs a friend anyway, even if she's mean. He smiled, tracing the curve of her forehead, more fragile than he meant, even then, but his left hand trembled, the aftershock of old wounds. Elsewhere, Gary cornered Linea's slick assistant in an elevator. The new courier, Turner, where'd he come from anyway? Does it matter? The man shot back, voice lower, more defensive than Gary expected. It matters if you want the right face for the cameras, Gary replied. The doors opened, crowding out their conversation. A new email chimed on Linea's phone. Thursday 4 p.m. press conference, please confirm final speaking order. She deleted it, then scheduled a call with the board, the deadline an unseen hand pressing against every hour she thought she controlled. Just as she set her phone down, a knock startled her. Her fixer, a man always dressed in off-the-rack gray, entered without preamble. Got a runner at your other property, need us to handle it. No unnecessary attention, she snapped. Make sure nothing gets in before Thursday. Gary, listening from the other side of the glass, slipped back into the hallway shadows, phone in his palm, options multiplying with every new fact. Every beat accelerated toward collision. Linnea gathered her army in preparation. Calls to HR, block Turner from all new applications. Message to school, monitor student Turner's paperwork for outstanding balances, no exceptions. The building manager was instructed to flag the Turner unit, leaks reported, whispers of a scheduled inspection. He's everywhere lately, she told her assistant, voice pitched thin and sharp as a paper cut. Find me someone to replace him before the announcement. I want visible compliance. Of course, Miss Ward, the assistant replied, eyes darting away. By Wednesday, the pressure flicked from implicit to direct. Garrett received an official memo. Your access will be revoked Thursday. Do not return after 12 p.m. that morning. His mailbag was nowhere to be found in the supply closet. When he arrived in the lobby, Linnea herself met him, ring of executives at her flank. Security, would you help our friend here? He seems to have trouble with protocol. He smiled, short and controlled. You could have just asked, he replied, hands loose at his sides, even as his fingers worked to mask a fresh burst of tremor. You don't run things here, she said into his shoulder. Whatever you think you're doing, you're not needed anymore. Gary, standing behind the rotating reception desk, watched the exchange. When Garrett picked up the torn badge and offered it back with the smallest nod, Gary caught the barest flicker of a resignation neither of them believed. Once outside, Garrett typed a brief message on his cracked phone. This is Turner. Yes, you can come now. He pressed send, the digits in his phone unfamiliar to anyone in the corridor. His tone on the call was neutral, body language folded in, but his eyes were ferociously awake. Meanwhile, at school, Ava was told she'd need a note to bring her bunny during the next fire drill, an echo of process intended to corral her into order. She wrote the note herself, Blair's pink crayon nearly tearing the sheet, and handed it to the classroom aide. That night, Gary walked a circuit around the block, finding Garrett quietly fixing a neighbor's porch lock, hands moving with unexpected assurance. They're going after you hard, Gary said under his breath. They've got time to waste, I don't, Garrett replied, knuckles white. You got anyone to back you up? Garrett looked him in the eye. Be at the boardroom Thursday, he said. You'll understand then. He should not have made this her problem. Thursday, 4 p.m., the Mohegan Bancorp main boardroom. Rows of leather chairs, digital screens blinking with prepared statements and coffee gone lukewarm, the whole space braided in anticipation as guests arrived with murmurs of coming announcements. Linnea, in a tailored navy suit, eyes ringed with sleepless delay, took her seat at the long glass table, board members to the right, PR to the left. On the wall, a family portrait, hers and her daughter's, looked down with stern quiet. The doors swung inward without fanfare. Garrett entered, not in postal gear but a collarless black shirt, wristwatch on display, steps unhurried. He moved as if he'd never meant to apologize for his presence, though the calluses on his hands announced years of work none here could catalog. Behind him, Gary hovered at the threshold, uncertain which side owned his loyalty now. Linea's voice sliced the air. "You were not invited. Security will escort you out." A new voice answered, echoing from the hall behind Gary, low but commanding. "He belongs here as much as you." All eyes turned as Jonas Sheridan entered, the former chairman, stooped but unmistakable, the shadow of his tenure hushing the room. His cane tapped deliberate counterpoints against the marble. Linnea stood. "Jonas, you're not." "Save it," he cut her off, his tone steel-dipped. To the room, years back this company nearly ceased to exist. Garrett Turner kept it alive. None of you cared to remember. A hush fell. Those who knew history or had only ever gossiped in kernels and half-truths stilled. Ava's stuffed bunny, peeking from her lap in the back row, seemed the only thing soft in the space. The sound of chaos unfolded outside. A man's harsh breathing, muffled shouts, a staffer banging on the glass. Someone burst in, desperate, clutching something, an envelope, silver and sharp-edged. Security moved, but Garrett held up a hand. "Don't move, just talk to me, that's all you need to do," he said, voice exactly as he'd used every day for a decade, precise, human, direct. The desperate man stammered, adrenaline shaking his arm. Linnea, mask almost off, barked for help. "Get control of this, right now." Garrett's posture softened, nothing in his hands, stance spread but unthreatening. "You're not alone," he told the man, soft but firm. "Nobody is going to hurt you today." A hush larger than the room filled the air. "Don't pretend you know what that's like," Linnea spat. Garrett's gaze finally found hers. "I know exactly what it's like," he said. Color left her face, draining from her forehead down, her hand anchoring to the back of the nearest chair with a desperate grip. In the far corner, Jonas rested his cane. The board members looked everywhere but at Linnea. One dug his nails into blotter, another's pen shook, a third whispered, "Oh God," so quiet it vanished. Linnea tried a final defense. "Everything I did was for this company, for..." Jonas held up a phone, speaker engaged. "Miss Ward, this is Irina Heller," a woman's sharp, accented voice cut in. "You no longer have my trust nor this company's. Consider your partnership ended, and take time for your family. They need you more than I do." Linnea swallowed, mouth moving but no words emerging. Garrett stepped back, letting security move forward now, no weapons, only blankets, familiar hands. He watched as the drama finished, offering nothing but calm. Linnea sagged, her certainty unraveled. He said, quietly, devastatingly, "You're not the only one losing something today." The look in her eyes collapsed, the mask gone for good. 6 months passed. The city's trees washed themselves new with summer rain, and in the apartment above the old grocery store, the air smelled faintly sweet of cut grass and possibility. Garrett scrawled a note for Ava's lunch, this one without a warning, just encouragement. "Keep your promises, even the silent ones." He dropped her off at school, one hand resting on her shoulder, thumb drumming an old blues rhythm she'd picked up as a toddler. Gary now wore a suit, not tailored, but proud, the Mohegan Company badge clipped to his lapel under a new title, Facilities Director. He greeted Garrett with a nod, respect earned not by title, but by the kind of quiet survival that made legends in places where nobody expected heroics. Linnea's name no longer gilded the corporate directories. She had resigned, her exit a single line in the business pages, justification wrapped in a call for family time. Witnesses recalled the day not as a scandal, but as a turning, something that allowed everyone left behind to measure themselves against endurance, not spectacle. That afternoon, Ava sat cross-legged on the stoop, her bunny now patched with a single blue button for its eye. She asked, "Daddy, do you still get patient with people even when they don't deserve it?" Her tone was searching but no longer wounded. He looked at her for a moment, the world's noise hushed behind the safety of those words. "I try," he said simply, voice without strain. She smiled, head pressed to his side. "That's enough, right?" He ruffled her hair, the gesture easy, practiced. "For today, it's enough." Outside, life went forward, new tenants, clean streets, risks unnamed and opportunities unclaimed. The patterns of loss and hope braided themselves quieter, tighter. For some, silence is punishment. For others, it's the true beginning, a space where change doesn't announce itself but grows quietly in rooms almost no one enters but those who need to return. From the hallway window, a shaft of June sun lit the dust motes swirling over their kitchen table. Garrett sat opposite Ava, his morning coffee gone cold, pen tapping through a stack of forms, summer camp waivers, overdue bill reminders, a letter from the school. Ava's laughter bounced in from outside, where she drew hopscotch squares with a stolen stick of blue chalk. He watched her through the glass, still surprised by how any day could open so differently from its beginning. Over the past half-year, the word future had become less a string of threats, more a loose promise he was trying to get the hang of. That promise was written in the way he remembered to pack carrot sticks in every lunch, in the way Ava had decorated her door with construction paper stars. The apartment was quieter now. The tension that once choked the air, fear of the unknown, whisper of eviction, the wary glance over his shoulder walking into a building where the locks could change overnight had loosened. He could breathe, even if every exhale was still careful. His phone vibrated against a recipe card. He checked the message, Gary again, persistent as ever. "I've got your badge. Board wants you at tomorrow's vendor review. You up for it?" Garrett smiled, small and genuine. He typed, "If they'll have me, I'll be there." The response was instant. "No one else I'd trust to fix the delivery protocols. And, Jonas says you can bring Ava for the tour." Garrett looked out to where Ava was now spinning, arms out, hair catching light. The world had closed off so many doors in her 6 years, but now, maybe, some could actually open. He pocketed the phone and found her at the curb. "You want to come see Daddy's new job tomorrow?" he asked. "Big building, elevators, more vending machines than you've ever seen." Ava's eyes widened, mouth in a half-smile. "Can I bring Bunny?" He nodded solemnly. "Company policy, all guests get a +1 minimum." She laughed, a bright, unguarded sound that chased the ghosts from the stoop. The next morning, the sun climbed strong and early. They rode together on the Green Line bus, Ava pressed to his side, her patched Bunny hugged tight on her lap. She fidgeted with the button eye, occasionally casting him sideways glances that tried and almost failed to look casual. Inside Mohegan Bancorp's atrium, the guard at the desk waved them through without question. Gary met them near the elevators, the awkwardness gone, replaced by the easy camaraderie of friendship hard-earned. "Welcome back, Mr. Turner, Miss Turner, and Bunny." He winked at Ava, who pretended to consider correcting him and then just grinned. They rode up, the elevator doors closing with a heavy hush, rising until the city became a tilt of gray-blue outside the glass. On the top floor, the boardroom was cleaner, lighter, sun pouring in, windows wide, no longer a fortress. Jonas Sheridan sat at the long table, reviewing notes. He looked smaller, less intimidating than the legend Ava had heard in kitchen table stories, but his eyes were kind. "Miss Turner," Jonas greeted Ava deadpan, "may I ask Bunny's opinion on our new logistics plan?" Ava considered for almost a full 10 seconds, then thumped the bunny's paw against the cool table. "He says don't lose anybody's snacks this time." Jonas barked out a surprised laugh. "Noted." Garrett watched the sunlight shift on the polished wood and remembered the day, months back, when everything braced for violence, for disaster, and instead bent toward something like healing. He still woke some nights in a sweat, heart galloping, sure he'd failed beyond repair. But every morning after, he rose and counted what remained. Today, he counted this room. He took a seat, watching as Gary laid out the new protocol charts. "I know the old way made sense for the last guy," Gary said, flicking through slides on the wall screen, "but we're ready to change. All it needs is someone who's actually seen the inside of a mail van when it's 90 degrees out." A few members shuffled awkwardly. The old hierarchy had been swept aside, and its absence let newer voices rise. Ava leaned over to him and whispered, "Are you in charge now?" He shook his head. "Nope, just helping, sometimes that's better." She nodded as though this matched a secret she'd already worked out. Jonas coughed for attention. "I'd like us to start with Mr. Turner's proposals." Garrett reached for the remote, hands steady. He spoke with quiet authority, not the nervous deference of a man asking for a job, but the clarity of someone unafraid to share hard-won truth. First, he began, if you want people to stay, you have to listen, not just during press conferences or when security's called. His eyes swept the table. You need to know which janitor's brother lost his apartment, which clerk's daughter was sick all winter. Otherwise, you're running a numbers game, not a company. There was a ripple of discomfort, but no one interrupted. He kept going, mapping out modest investments, new uniforms, a lending library for school families, a revised escalation policy with real mediation. The room warmed, suspicion giving way to constructive debate. Ava listened, her head nestled in her arms on the table's edge, lips moving in soundless sentences, as if repeating everything for Bunny's benefit. Later, as the meeting wound down, Jonas stood and gave Garrett a firm handshake. I've learned more today than in the last 4 board reports, he admitted. You ever rethink an executive track, let me know. Garrett smiled, not likely, you'd have to rewrite the job description. Ava giddy twirled in the lobby as staff filtered past, faces less pinched, laughter skipping across the marble. People nodded at Garrett now, recognition in their eyes. Gary clapped him on the shoulder. Want lunch, staff cafeteria my treat. Ava perked up, is there ice cream? Only for department heads, Gary replied, winking. Lunch was a simple joy, no urgency, no risk of sudden termination. Ava built a tower from jelly packets. Gary told a story about a disastrous elevator repair gone wrong, and Garrett let himself laugh, the sound as unfamiliar as it was welcome. In the easy chaos of forks on trays, he heard Ava murmur, Daddy's a hero, to Bunny, as though she didn't expect anyone to catch it. Afterward, Gary walked them out, passing a small brass plaque near the entrance that wasn't there the week before. Garrett caught the inscription, in honor of all who keep U.S. moving. A GT. He stared, uncertain what to do with the feeling swelling in his chest. Gary only shrugged. Figured you'd hate a ceremony, he said, but people should know. Garrett managed, thanks. Most of it's for the folks who can't say it themselves, Gary replied, softer. They parted at the revolving doors. Gary strode off, loose and content. Garrett and Ava wove down the street in companionable silence, Ava skipping ahead to press her face against a bakery window. He thought of Linnea, wherever she was now, her newsprint exit, her long, private fall. He hoped in some distant part of himself that she had found a moment of peace or forgiveness, if only to prevent another echo of her pain passing forward. Summer days lengthened. Money was still tight, always would be maybe, but stability had a foothold now, enough for late-night stories, Ava's wild tangles of art, the repaired bike in the entryway meant for Friday trips down the river road. Neighbors greeted them by name. Garrett fixed a balky door for Mrs. Peng across the hall and was paid in banana bread. One evening in July, as heat hung thick over their street, Garrett and Ava sat watching the stars from their tiny balcony. She leaned into his side, Bunny in her lap. Did you ever want to give up? She asked suddenly, voice flat with seriousness. He considered, then answered truthfully, more times than I could count, but I never wanted to give up on you. She nodded, I'd probably be a terrible mailman. He snorted, ruffling her hair. You'd be a wonder, you'd never lose a letter, even if it was written in pink crayon. Ava was quiet a long time, chewing on the idea. What if we get unlucky again? She whispered. What if there's another bad day? Garrett tucked her tighter beneath his arm, feeling the uncertain thud of her heart through the thin cotton of her shirt. Then we start again, because that's how we made it through the last one. She turned to look up at him, eyes earnest. Did you write yourself notes too? He smiled, not on paper, but every morning I told myself, be gentle with those who need you most. That's how I knew what to write for you. Ava drew her knees up, sleepy. Maybe you could write one for me now. He took her hand and, with a fingertip, traced invisible words across her palm. It says, you are the best thing I ever delivered. She closed her hand around the message, and with a sigh leaned her head into his shoulder. Bunny, ever observant, kept watch as the city lights blinked on by hundreds. Across the city in quieter rooms, stories were changing too. Linnea, freed now from the crushing urgency she once called purpose, had moved into her own smaller apartment. Sometimes she even walked through the park on afternoons with her daughter, awkward first, but improving as slow as tree rings. She started to answer the phone herself, to let silence fill spaces she'd once tried to erase with command. Some days she hated Garrett Turner for what he cost her, pride, title, the illusion of control. But sometimes she understood in flashes. He had saved her as much as he'd saved himself, calling time out on a catastrophe she only half recognized until it flooded the room. She visited the building once, peering up at her old office from the street, feeling outside herself. She did not linger. Ava and her father flourished in the modest way those who survive difficulty do, each day incrementally easier, the old scars softened by routine, small joys piled atop one another until the sum resembled hope. Ava made friends easily. The school never again queried her about a stuffed animal or lunch debt. Garrett took on more hours at Mohegan's vendor services, and though no one called him CEO, his view of what mattered widened every month: dignity, patience, and the quiet labor of making a life with what you had. On the anniversary of the Boardroom incident, Jonas hosted a gathering, not a party, but a long table of staff and families in the lobby, kids running wild, no speeches. Garrett and Ava came. There was cake and laughter and the reminder that not all endings signal loss. Some simply empty a space so something wiser has room to grow. When dusk fell, Gary found Garrett on the balcony, watching the lights flicker in the city's grid. "Think you'll stick around this time?" Gary asked, gentle. Garrett considered it a long moment. "I think I finally know what sticking around means." They shared a companionable silence. Downstairs, Ava's voice rose above the others, calling for her father. Garrett smiled, the ache of worry eased if not vanished, and excused himself to join the gathering. Walking home that night, Ava offered up her battered bunny, now an unofficial company mascot, as Garrett carried her the last block. "You know," she said, eyes drooping, "he'd be a good friend for someone who's all alone, even if they're mean sometimes." He nodded, hoisting her gently higher. "I think you're right, even the mean ones might need a bunny." Ava's head dropped onto his shoulder, breath slow and even. They entered the apartment, the hush greeting them fresh and undemanding. Garrett looked out at the city, the promise of tomorrow, always out there, stubborn and unbroken. "Be gentle," he murmured, closing the door. Then, together, they stepped into the quiet that finally felt like home.